my pleasure to introduce Representative Giovanni Capriglioni, and I just met his lovely wife up there, Elisa, who he has been married to for 18 years. They have 3 children attending Carroll ISD schools, and if you know anything about Texas high school football, they always do pretty well. He is the owner and president. Well, let me back up here. He received a Bachelor of Science degree in physics, his MBA in finance from Santa Clara University. After school, he went to work for a DFW-based venture capital private equity firm. Now the owner and president of his own small business, Texas Adventure Capital. That sounds fun, sounds adventurous, which provides business services to various investment fund managers and business owners. His focus is investing in, Texas-based small businesses. Previously, he held positions at computer engineering companies specializing in semiconductor design and internet products, and was senior vice president at an investment firm where he managed the loan and equity portfolios of various American businesses. He was elected to the Texas House of Representatives in 2012 and is serving his 4th term representing District 98, which encompasses all or part of Grapevine, Colleyville, Southlake, Keller, Westlake, North Fort Worth, and Haslett. Currently serves on the House Committee on Pensions, Investment, and Financial Services, House Committee on Appropriations, of which he chairs the Subcommittee on Infrastructure Resiliency, that's a nice word too, and Investment, and the House Select Committee on Mass Violence Prevention and Community Safety. He's a member of the following House caucuses: Innovation and Technology Caucus, Manufacturers Caucus, Rural Caucus, Sportsmen's Caucus, Veterans Caucus, Farm to Table Caucus, and the Fine Arts Education Caucus. He also chairs the Tarrant County Delegation, and with that, he's going to give us an update on some of the legislation that he's been a part of for the last several years, I would say. So, thank you. Welcome. You can grab a microphone and water.
Can you hear me? Hi, everybody. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Giovanni Capriglioni. I'm a Texas State rep. I have the honor and privilege of representing almost 200,000 people in Northeast Tarrant County. In the previous panel, they talked about the gibberish that IT people might have and the gibberish that lawyers might have. Well, I am in the career of the ultimate gibberish. I'm a politician. It's my #1 job to go and explain a lot of what's going on. I'm not a lawyer and I'm not in IT, but I do pass laws related to IT. So I come to a lot of these events primarily to hear, to listen, provide my information so that as we get ready for the next legislative session, we kind of know what we're doing, and we hear from the community, and we hear from people there. I mean, Sean is here, and Eric and others who have come to my office or have spoken to me about some of the legislation that we've worked on. In a way, what I consider one of my #1 jobs is to, in a way, explain to a bunch of people who this isn't their specialty, right? But explain to a lot of other lawmakers about the public policy benefits, the public policy needs and requirements when it comes to cybersecurity and cyber defense. We live in the greatest state ever, and it has a budget of $250 billion. It has over 200 state agencies. Between all of its employees, we have almost 100,000 employees, and I would say we're a humongous target when it comes to cyber attacks, the state of Texas. Not only the state itself, because of all the information that we have, that's health records, that's criminal records, that's vital records, but also the state itself has a lot of energy, financial, retail industry. So Texas is always on the list and always on the map. And about 4 years ago, so I say that because it should be known as a target, it should be known as something that we should be taking care of. And yet 4 years ago, there was this group that was focused on recording some legislators and all that kind of stuff. And so one of the things they did is they sent an intern around and dropped off a USB stick at each one of our offices, okay? Obviously, don't put that in and all that kind of stuff. But When I went to go and find out who to tell, I realized that our Texas capital, the greatest capital in the greatest state, didn't have a cybersecurity person at the Capitol. And I was thinking, okay, but I hook up to the Wi-Fi. How do I know I'm hooking up to the right Wi-Fi? How do I know someone's not coming in and putting in the USB stick? So that kind of started my personal progress from about 4 years ago to today to working on that. So today what I do, during the interim, I was the House Select Chairman on cybersecurity. I'm also subcommittee chairman on the budget, and they've essentially created a section of the budget. We've created a section of the budget which we call Siri, no relation to the other Siri, but what I mostly do is all the IT spend. All right, so the state of Texas has about $10 billion each year in IT contracts, and that's everything IT, from assessments all the way to training, all the way to cybersecurity. And so I'm, whatever, I was a tech guy, I was a nerd when I was a kid, and so they're like, all right, this is your thing, Geo, you get to go and work on that. And so about 4 years ago, what we did is I said, all right, where do we start? So I worked with, and with some of the people here, I worked with House Bill 8, which is the first real bill in a long time that focused on upgrading the state's defenses. What we do now is we have a rigorous schedule and a definition for each one of our agencies on how to do assessments. In an effort to try and promote this and get this in everyone's head, I messed with something called Sunset Commission. So what we have in Texas, each one of those agencies is on a calendar where every 10 years or so, they have to justify their existence. It's a very conservative thing. DPS, DMV, TCEQ, it doesn't matter. They have to go through a full-blown management consultant deal where they have to justify why we should keep them as an agency. And there was 12 different items. Are you following your mission statement? Are you making sure you're taking care of the finances? Are your employees knowledgeable in what they're trying to do? So I added a 13th one, and I just put in there cybersecurity, right? And then, like most things in the legislature, about 6 months later, after it passed, people are like, all right, what the hell does that mean, right? What do we have to do, and why do we have to do it? And now, every agency, as part of the justification for existence, has to have an in-depth conversation with themselves and with their employees and with other agencies and other stakeholders about what their stance is, where they are on training, where they are on upgrading their systems. Now, one of the difficulties with being in the legislature and working on a topic like this, which might be different than what you all have, is you all have politics in your businesses too. You all have budget constraints. You know, I'm fighting for cybersecurity dollars at the same time that someone else is asking for other justified things like healthcare and roads and so on. The difference is, though, we only meet every 2 years. And technology has this tendency to move around a little bit in that time. So what'll happen is we'll start doing our assessments, let's say at the beginning of next year. Okay, so now you're talking January 2020. We get those assessments back as the government, so you get them back like March, April, start doing it. And what those assessments do is they say, hey, this is where this agency is lacking. You need more people that do this. You need more products that do that. And the budget team hasn't met yet. So around October of that year, they start going and they start pitching, saying, hey, we've gone out for quotes, for ideas on this, and we think this is how much we need, and this is the priorities that we have for this. Then me and 180 other people, we show up in January of now January 2021. For the first 60 days, we're not allowed to pass anything, so we meet a lot of people, we shake a lot of hands, kiss some babies, and we go, and now it's May. And in May, we go and we have to decide, and my subcommittee is the one where we do a lot of that. We got to decide which ones we're choosing. At the same time, we're passing 1,500 other pieces of legislation. We decide and we go and we fund some, not all, but we go and decide to fund some of it. And then those agencies have to go out and do a full public procurement. Now think about this. Think about how this is different than your company. They have to go and tell everybody everything that they need to maintain their cybersecurity status. Okay? Which in a sense might also be a little bit of a risk too. They go out for procurement. Those typically take about 6 months to go and get done. Long story short, it's now been almost 2 years to solve the problem and to get it funded that you had 2 years ago. And sometimes it doesn't work as quickly as possible. So one of the things that I'm trying to do is find ways to, in the interim, especially in things like technology, especially in things like public safety, which I think cybersecurity is to go and find faster ways to do that. One of the things that I'm going to be working on for the next session is something that the federal government shockingly does right. It's called legacy modernization. To go and have an interim ability to go and have agencies vie for a pool of money so they can go and say, hey, we want this money now. It's an emergency, or it's critical, or it'll save us money. I'll give you an example. At the Railroad Commission, which if you don't know what the Railroad Commission has nothing to do with railroads, it's the energy part, and they have a system that goes and tells people where everyone's drilling, where all the pipelines are, where all the caps are, and all that kind of stuff, safety reasons. And the back end for that computer literally has been running in a basement in Texas since 1968. Okay? I've seen the printouts, I've seen the computer screen, and we spend a significant amount of money just keeping that system going. In this past session, for instance, we looked at Department of Family Protective Services. Theirs is a lot newer. That one was developed in 1975. And 60% of that agency's IT budget is keeping that system running. Okay? So what happens is, now in my committee, we went and we funded them, and we funded TCEQ a little bit. But what I'd like to see is a way for us to be able to do faster and modernize all that kind of stuff. Now, as I'm sure you've heard, one of the things that was a priority for me after working on state stuff was realizing that when it comes to cybersecurity, there's a lot of risk, not just at the state level, but also cities and counties and other governments, okay? School districts and so on. That seemed to be the gaping hole for me. So I passed legislation to require basically every government employee, city, state, local, to go through a certain amount of training. They're all going to have to go and pass some training and do all that kind of stuff. Now, I'll tell you something. When I originally wrote the bill, I'll tell you how a comma really does make a difference here. So when I originally wrote the bill, the idea was any government employee or elected official, okay, who uses a computer 25% or more of the time, okay? So that way you don't have, let's say if you're a city councilman and you never use the city's computer, you don't have to do the training or whatever. Well, anyway, I forgot a comma, and so now everybody has to take it, all elected officials and all city and state employees. So when your local officials get upset about a training cybersecurity bill, that was me, but I think, yeah, I think it's super important though, right? Because if there's one group of people who absolutely needs to know about what the risks are, it's our elected officials. We just had in Texas one of the biggest organized attacks on local government entities ever in the United States history. And that was an attack on 21 different government entities, mostly law enforcement, mostly smaller communities. And this was a ransomware attack that effectively took all of them offline, at least temporarily. And as we go through and we start saying, okay, obviously the first thing was intervention. The governor called for the first time ever, the governor called for basically a state of emergency related to a cybercrime. Our Texas Military Department, State Guard, which I'm a member of, was called up for the sole purpose of going to the SOC and go and work with these local cities to let them know what was going on and how to solve that problem. Now, the good news is it wasn't like Atlanta or something like that, where it went and cost a significant amount of money. But I think what we'll see when we go back and say, how did this happen and why did it happen? Well, what we're gonna find, possibly and probably, is that some very minor, simple things were not done correctly. We weren't doing backups. We weren't changing our passwords, okay? I mean, this is not something that I would say not rocket science. I mean, it will be someday, but where we are right now is getting people to a basic level of training. So I want to talk about one other items, and then if there's any questions or really what I'm here for is answers. But one of the things that I worked on last session, which I had limited success on, I'll start off with, but I did work on quite a bit, is this concept of data privacy. And I do believe strongly that there's this intersection between security and data privacy, especially when you're from the government, right? I have so much, where the state has so much information about you, that it is absolutely critical that the state maintain your privacy. But I also think the government, the state, has a role for its citizens to help them maintain their right to privacy. previous panel, they talked about, oh, well, what if there's, you know, there's a cloud system and it's in another country and some of your data goes to another country. Okay, if you work for a manufacturing company, I totally understand your risk. But imagine me going to talk to some of my taxpayers or some of the residents in my district and letting them know that possibly some of, I don't know, their election data is in a cloud and maybe it's in another country like Russia, right? They're going to demand that we stop doing that. They're going to demand that there's safety and privacy that's associated with that is there from top to bottom. So I worked on the bill. It's called House Bill 4390. I'll start off by saying it's not CCPA. It's not California's version of it. That was the attack on the bill. By the way, that's the attack everywhere in the legislature. You just say, well, that's kind of like California's, and you can help kill a bill, just like that. So,
I heard those questions.
I know. It was kind of difficult. It's hard. You know, California sometimes messes stuff up so badly that there's like no way around it. But so I'm gonna have to change the name of it. But I worked on that legislation, and what we ended up finally getting to, I have never had, by the way, as an aside, more people opposed to anything I've ever done. I have passed now almost 50 different pieces of legislation. I worked on everything from the budget to healthcare issues. But I go and I say, hey, I think people should deserve a little bit more privacy. I had everybody, like the whole planet, it seemed, against my bill. Title companies, doctors' offices, Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, every people I didn't even know had privacy issues, right? Just came out. And for the first time ever, I mean, and it's hard for a lobbyist in Texas to go and, because I'm friends with them and I know that if they oppose my bill, I might ding them on something else, right? So they try not to, but I have 41 different organizations and individuals go and testify against my privacy legislation. So that's when you know it's probably not gonna pass. So what I did is I kind of salvaged a little bit. What I ended up working on was data breach notification and upgrading our Texas data breach notification laws. Before, essentially what Texas's law said is that if there's a breach, then that company is required to disclose it to its customers as soon as possible. I'm not a lawyer, but that means probably never, right? So I went and I put, again, the comma, or within 60 days, whichever comes first, okay? And if there's 200 or more individuals who lose their personal and private information, then the Attorney General needs to be notified as long with the description and so on. And finally, the other thing that I added to that was I created the Texas Privacy Council. This November, we're going to stand up essentially a council here in Texas. It's going to have 15 different members. I'm probably going to be one of them. And there's going to be various people from different industries. They're all taking applications right now. The governor gets to pick some, the lieutenant governor and Speaker of the House. And the goal of that is to work for 1 year, right? So we have 1 year for all of us to go and get input from folks and work on the Texas version of privacy and privacy legislation. What the Speaker's office has told me is they've never had so many people apply to be appointed. So for those 5 spots, they've already had over 400 different organizations and individuals apply. But that's something that I will absolutely need help on and support and what I'm going to be talking about. And obviously the Attorney General of Texas just last week announced an antitrust, started actually the antitrust lawsuit against Google. And included in all of that is their Google's ability to basically know where everybody's doing and what they're doing, and obviously monetizing that information. With that, I think I only have 2 or 3 minutes, but I don't know if there's any questions at all. I see one there. Yep.
So, as some. Can you hear me all right?
Yep. Okay.
I feel like Tell them you're from Georgia, though. Yeah, I'm from Georgia, so
okay.
if you offend me, it has
I'm just
no
in Georgia.
practical
I was in
implication.
Savannah. I went to the Georgia Cybersecurity Center.
Excellent, excellent. So as a frequent author of gibberish to, a politician,
Yep.
how do we bridge the gap? How do we, I don't think it's reasonable for us to expect, former CISOs or CIOs to be elected to Congress for pivotal issues like this. How do you get information contextualized when you don't come to it through your prior career?
Well, so the one cool thing about the American system of government is we don't have to have any knowledge about the laws that we're passing. Right? But we're really good at figuring out what people want and what they need. So Eric came to my office. He waited there a long time, unfortunately, because I was at the Capitol. And we sat down and we talked. And for me, and I'm sure this is true for other reps, we're in Plano, this is either Matt Shaheen's or Jeff Leach's district, set up a meeting, say, hey, I'm an expert on this, or I know this, and let me give you some ideas about things that we should do, and they will listen if you're a voter in their district. I mean, that's just it. And I mean, we don't have that much of a bar there. So we will never fully understand everything. I mean, I had to pass bills on Alzheimer's, on brain surgery, on all that kind of stuff. I can't. But I'm very good at figuring out what can and cannot pass and how to make that stuff pass. Okay, yep, sorry. And then you, and then
Thanks. So you're working on Texas's version of a privacy bill.
Yep.
California's got theirs. I'm from Washington State. They're working on their own. What's your thought on this patchwork series of privacy bills? We already have a patchwork. All 50 states have data breach notification. None of them are the same. With the realization that most organizations and companies do business across the country,
no, that's a good question.
is there a
That was
push
something
to do
about-
this nationally as opposed to
Sure.
creating more problem? I
Everyone
know
here-
Sean probably likes it because it keeps him busy, but
Anyone here, I want to see hands, anyone here who thinks that Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, and Donald Trump are going to get in a room together and hash out privacy? It's not going to happen, right? So you're going to end up with 50 different, it is. I mean, unless something happens, but we're talking about impeachment. We're not talking about privacy. I think this is important. It's critical. We need to get it done. We get it done now. What I think is that if Texas leads on this, other states will follow. And at some point, the federal government will get its act together, and they're going to have to look at some model legislation, and I think it should be ours, not California's, and not someone else's.
So actively with other states to understand where they are in the process and try
yeah.
to make the bills as similar as we can, because it's a challenge.
It is going to be a challenge, but as always, I think we'll do it better than everybody else. So my goal is to go, so I've been to NCSL, I've been to, which is the National Conference of State Legislators. I've given speeches on data privacy there. I've been in Georgia, I'm going to be going to Michigan. So yeah, I've kind of taken that up on my personal self to go and do that. But I think this is too important. Otherwise, what's going to happen for these tech companies, to be just blunt, they're going to see their valuations continue to crater. You're going to see less and less user bases. People realize that everything they're doing is being sold. All right, with that, I apologize.
So-
but I don't know.
I'm an ex-
There, if
Can I ask a quick question, State Representative?
Yep.
Congratulations on your wonderful work for cyber resilience. I firmly believe that to build the cyber resilience, it starts with awareness, education, and training. So the bill that you passed and the training program that you provide for your government officials, could that be shared with the citizens? Because I believe that if there's a program like that, it should be shared with the citizens, and we have a way to do that.
Absolutely, and I worked with UTSA to try and find a way to kind of make, and they have an idea, which would be great to do it, because I mean, there's different levels of training, right? So the city employee, we can kind of force them to do it and so on. And they thought about talking about, just like we have public service announcements effectively, and to go and be able to create free online cybersecurity stuff. So I'm more than happy to work with anybody on that. All right, well, thank you all very much. I appreciate it.